Mr. Speaker, we continue down this path of considering bills that are going nowhere. I sincerely wish my friends on the other side of the aisle would stop this conservative merry-go-round. The majority leader called this week Stop Government Abuse Week. Abuse? Really? My friends on the other side of the aisle have continued to ignore the plight of middle-class and working poor Americans, immigrants, hoping for a better life for their families, and denying the undeniable impact of climate change, just to name a few. This is even after shutting down the government for purely political purposes and playing a game of chicken with the debt limit, and yet my Republican friends are calling routine government work abuse. That seems like a stretch to me. Abuse is when under-regulated industries spill unknown chemicals into the West Virginia water supply. Abuse is when coal ash pours into the waters of North Carolina, when Wall Street bankers crash our economy after taking advantage of underfunded and overworked regulators. That is exactly the kind of abuse that the government needs to stop. You want to talk about abuse? Let's talk about today's measure. This bill will not make the regulatory process more balanced or transparent. It will strangle in red tape. It will not make rule-making more fair. It will tip the scales in favor of businesses with the most resources. Under this measure, improving access to health care and restraining the financial institutions that have unleashed havoc on our economy will become even more difficult. It is nothing more than poorly disguised political fodder aimed at stymieing the executive branch's rulemaking power in favor of some corporate interests that run amok on the environment and American workers. Most egregious is the requirement for agencies to provide the private sector early consultation on major rules. This would give well-funded industry an unfair advantage not afforded to the general public and other stakeholders like public interest, taxpayer, and environmental groups. Clearly, the interest in amending UMRA only extends to certain privileged parties. If my friends on the other side of the aisle want to see what happens when you allow private interests to run rampant without any government regulations, they need only look to the smog-filled skies above China. This bill also politicizes independent agencies designed to protect the rights of hardworking Americans, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Securities Exchange Commission, the National Labor Relations Board, Consumer Product Safety Commission, as well as the Federal Communications Commission. I might add, they kind of left out the Federal Reserve for some reason I don't understand. But all of those other agencies will all have to answer to the whims of politics. It also forces agencies to choose the cheapest regulatory option over the best. This is legislating the answer to the same kind of question that a homeowner has to decide when hiring a contractor. Do you want it done cheap or do you want it done right? Look, I get it. I understand where we are in the congressional cycle, but I think that it is unfortunate my friends across the aisle would rather score political points and write bumper stickers than actually legislate. While I think it is a good thing that most of these partisan measures will never go anywhere, I can't help but point out that we should be making better use of our limited time here. We should be raising the minimum wage in order to give millions of hardworking Americans the pay they have earned. Nearly 5 years have passed since the last increase in the federal minimum wage. Currently, a full-time minimum wage worker makes less than $16,000 per year, which is below the poverty line for a family of two or more. This is unacceptable. It is time for Republicans to end their relentless obstruction and join Democrats in an effort to provide for the middle class. I reserve the balance of my time. I'm fascinated by the fact that I don't believe my colleagues have the courage of their convictions. I doubt very seriously if we were to put a flood insurance measure on the floor, not on suspension, I doubt very seriously that it would not pass. It will pass if it were to come to the floor that way. I believe that if we offer up a reasonable minimum wage, I don't think anybody in this country can say that $16,000 for a family of two or more people is sufficient in order for them to be able to meet requisites having to do with food and rent alone, let alone educating their children or providing daycare. I don't think anybody really is against those who paid into the employment system receiving unemployment compensation. And yet we find ourselves here repeatedly addressing a significant number of matters. And someone wrote the other day, if they got a stain on their tie, it would be because of Obamacare. My goodness gracious, people, we're a legislative body, and we could be about the business of serious legislating, and that kind of legislating would require, among other things, not just bipartisan activity as this legislation has manifested itself as being bipartisan, but it would allow that we would really sit down and talk through the things that are needed in this country. There's nobody around that doesn't believe that we have bridges that are in disrepair. I haven't found anyone that said that if we invested in infrastructure that it would not create more jobs in this country. The people want us to do this and not to do one-sided, one-way measures that are not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I would allow that I ask unanimous consent to enclose the statement of administration policy.
Without objection.
And I will only lift one paragraph, and that's the last paragraph and sentence. H.R. 899 would unnecessarily add to the already robust analytical and procedural requirements of the rulemaking process. In particular, H.R. 899 would create needless grounds for judicial review, unduly slowing the regulatory process. In addition, it would add layers of procedural steps that would interfere with agency priority setting and compliance with statutory mandates. And I guess, not surprisingly to my friends on the other side, if H.R. 899 were presented to the President, his senior advisors would recommend that he veto the bill. Mr. Speaker, contrary to my friend's favorite rhetoric, the free market does not solve all problems. Markets fail. We've seen that, haven't we now? Government is the actor of last resort when the market does not create the necessary incentives for businesses and individuals to protect the public good. What's more, federal regulations are not strangling the economy or preventing growth. In fact, it's quite the opposite. As the Office of Management and Budget has reported, major federal regulations issued over the last 10 years resulted in annual benefits from $193 billion to $800 billion, while costs are only between $57 billion to $84 billion. It seems to me that an $84 billion investment with an $800 billion return is not a bad thing. Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I'm going to offer an amendment to the rule to bring up legislation that would raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour and give at least 25 million Americans a well-deserved pay raise. A business in the constituency that I serve did this on their own, Jackson's Ice Cream Parlor in Dania Beach. raised it because they said they feel the pain of the people that work with them and that they made a fair profit and wanted to share it with them. The American people are calling for an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of the amendment in the record, along with extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to vote no and defeat the previous question, vote no on the underlying bills, and I now yield back the balance of my time.